20 years of separation collapsed into nothing. James froze, his protective instincts suddenly tangled with recognition, disbelief, and a flood of memories he'd locked away long ago. The woman being cornered by 3 intimidating men wasn't just any stranger in need, she was Eliza, the girl who had once held his entire heart in her hands before disappearing from his life without explanation. Now here she was, fear in her eyes, not yet seeing him, and everything was about to change. Hey everyone, if you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that remind us how life can change in an instant. Your support means everything. James Parker adjusted his worn leather jacket as he walked briskly through downtown, mentally calculating how much time he had before needing to pick up his daughter from her after-school program. At 42, his life had settled into a predictable rhythm: work at the architectural firm, caring for 12-year-old Sophie, occasional dates that never seemed to lead anywhere, and the constant, quiet ache of raising a child alone since his wife's death 5 years ago. The evening air carried the first hints of autumn, and James found himself thinking about the approaching parent-teacher conferences. Sophie was struggling with math this year, and he wondered if he should hire a tutor. These everyday concerns occupied his mind as he cut through a side street, taking his usual shortcut to the parking garage. That's when he heard it, a woman's voice, tense and controlled but unmistakably afraid. "I've already told you no. Please step aside." James glanced toward the sound. About 30 feet ahead, 3 men had formed a semicircle around a woman, backing her toward the brick wall of an old warehouse. They weren't touching her, but their posture was threatening, their laughter carrying an edge that made James's skin crawl. "Come on, just one drink," the tallest one said, leaning closer to her. "Why so unfriendly?" Without thinking, James changed direction. He'd always been this way, unable to walk past someone in trouble. It had gotten him into fights in high school, and Sophie often teased him about his superhero complex. But he couldn't help it. His mother had raised him to stand up when others wouldn't. "Hey," he called out, his voice deeper and more authoritative than usual. The lady said no. The 3 men turned, sizing him up. James was tall and still fit from his morning runs, but he was outnumbered. The woman used their momentary distraction to step sideways, away from the wall. That's when she looked up, and James felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Those eyes. He would know those eyes anywhere, deep amber with flecks of gold near the pupils. Her hair was shorter now, styled in a professional bob instead of the long waves he remembered, and fine lines had formed at the corners of her eyes. But it was her. Eliza Reynolds. His first love. The girl who had vanished from his life during their sophomore year of college without so much as a goodbye. For a split second, James faltered, the shock of recognition momentarily overriding everything else. Then the tallest man took a step toward him, and instinct took over. "This isn't your business, man," the guy said, his words slightly slurred. "We're just having a friendly conversation." "Doesn't look friendly to me," James replied, moving closer, positioning himself between the men and Eliza. "And she doesn't seem interested." He could feel Eliza behind him now, could sense her recognition in the way she had gone completely still. The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken words and ancient history. The tallest man looked like he might argue further, but one of his friends grabbed his arm. "Come on, Mark. Not worth it. There's that new bar around the corner." Mark hesitated, then spat on the ground near James's feet. "Whatever. Plenty of other women who know how to have fun." James stood his ground until all 3 had disappeared around the corner, their laughter fading into the evening. Only then did he turn to face the woman he had once believed was the love of his life. "Eliza," he said, her name feeling both foreign and achingly familiar on his tongue. She stared at him, her professional composure cracking to reveal a complex mix of emotions, surprise, embarrassment, and something deeper he couldn't quite identify. "James," she whispered. Thank you. I was handling it, but, thank you." An awkward silence stretched between them, 20 years of absence expanding into a chasm neither seemed to know how to cross. "Are you okay?" he finally asked. She nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture so familiar it made his chest ache. Yes. They were just persistent. I was leaving a client meeting and they followed me from the restaurant. Do you need me to walk you somewhere? Your car? A taxi? My hotel is just 2 blocks from here. She hesitated, then added, I'm in town for a conference. I live in Chicago now. Chicago. All this time, she'd been just a few hours away. James checked his watch. He still had 40 minutes before he needed to pick up Sophie. 40 minutes to unravel 20 years of questions. Can I walk you there? He asked. Unless you'd rather not. Something flickered across her face, relief, perhaps, or resignation. I'd appreciate that. And maybe we could talk. Just for a few minutes. They walked in silence at first, the space between them heavy with unasked questions. The city moved around them, cars honking, people rushing home from work, the first streetlights flickering on, but James felt suspended in time, hyper-aware of her presence beside him. You look good, she finally said, glancing at him sideways. Life has treated you well? James almost laughed at the simplicity of the question, at how impossible it was to answer. It's been complicated, he replied. I'm an architect now. Have my own firm with a partner. And I have a daughter, Sophie. She's 12. You're married? Eliza asked, her voice carefully neutral. Widowed, he said, the word still difficult after all this time. 5 years ago. Cancer. Oh, James. I'm so sorry. The genuine pain in her voice made him look at her. That's. I can't imagine how hard that must have been. Must still be. Some days are better than others, he admitted. Sophie makes it easier. She's amazing, smart, funny, stubborn as hell. Reminds me of my mother. They reached the hotel, a sleek high-rise with a doorman who nodded as they approached. Eliza stopped at the entrance. Would you like to come up for a coffee? She asked. Or we could sit in the lobby. There are things I should have said a long time ago. 20 years of questions. 20 years of wondering why she had disappeared, why she had never returned his calls, why the girl who had promised to love him forever had vanished without explanation. I have to pick up my daughter at 7, he said. But yes, I'd like that. They sat in a quiet corner of the hotel lobby, 2 steaming cups of coffee between them. Eliza's hands trembled slightly as she added cream to hers, and James was struck by how vulnerable she suddenly seemed, so different from the confident woman he'd observed handling those men before she'd noticed him. I owe you an explanation, she began, her eyes fixed on her cup. For leaving the way I did. For not saying goodbye. James had imagined this moment countless times over the years, had rehearsed what he would say if he ever saw her again. But now that she was here, all his practiced words evaporated. You disappeared, he said simply. One day we were planning our future, and the next, you were gone. Your roommate wouldn't tell me anything. Your parents said you needed space. I thought, he stopped, the old pain surprisingly fresh. I thought something terrible had happened. Or that everything between us had been a lie. Eliza closed her eyes briefly, pain etching itself across her features. It wasn't a lie. What we had was real, the most real thing in my life at that point. She took a deep breath. I was pregnant, James. The words hit him like a physical blow. He stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. We were going to have a baby? She nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. I found out the week before finals. I was terrified. We were both so young, with so many plans. You had that internship lined up in New York, and I was supposed to study abroad. I didn't know what to do. James felt dizzy, memories rearranging themselves in light of this new information. Why didn't you tell me? We could have figured it out together. I was going to, she said. I had it all planned out. But then my father had his first heart attack. She explained how she'd gone home that weekend to tell her parents about the pregnancy, only to find her father collapsed in the kitchen. The next few days had been a blur of hospitals and fear. Her mother, overwhelmed and deeply religious, had convinced her that the stress of an unplanned pregnancy might kill her father. She said I had two choices, either terminate the pregnancy and never tell you, or have the baby but give it up for adoption and cut all ties with you. She believed you deserved a chance at the future you'd worked so hard for, without being tied down by an unexpected child. That wasn't her decision to make, James said, anger flaring. Or yours. I had a right to know. I know that now, Eliza whispered. I've known it for years. But at 20, with my father in intensive care and my mother falling apart, I was scared and confused. I made the choice I thought would hurt the fewest people. What happened? James asked, his voice rough. With the baby? Eliza reached for her purse and pulled out her phone. Her hand still trembling, she pulled up a photo and turned the screen toward him. A young man in a graduation cap and gown smiled at the camera, his arm around an older couple James didn't recognize. His name is Nathan, she said softly. He's 19 now, studying engineering at MIT. His parents are wonderful people, a doctor and a teacher from Vermont. They send me updates every year, though we've never met in person. That was part of the closed adoption agreement. James stared at the photo, searching the young man's features for traces of himself or Eliza. The shape of the eyes, perhaps. The set of the jaw. A son. He had a son he'd never known. He has your smile, Eliza said, watching him closely. And your talent for mathematics, apparently. James handed the phone back, his mind reeling. All these years, he'd imagined countless scenarios to explain Eliza's disappearance, another man, family problems, a sudden disillusionment with their relationship. Never this. Never a child. I've thought about reaching out to you so many times, she continued. Especially after Nathan turned 18 and I received this photo. But I was a coward. I was afraid of your anger, your hatred. I told myself it was too late to undo what I'd done. I don't hate you, James said, surprising himself with the truth of it. I'm angry, yes. Hurt. Shocked. But I don't hate you. Eliza wiped away a tear. You should. What I did was unforgivable. James was silent for a long moment, processing everything. Outside the hotel windows, the city had fully transitioned to evening, lights glowing against the darkening sky. Why are you telling me now? He finally asked. Because life is too short for secrets, she said. Because seeing you today, after all this time, it felt like the universe was giving me one last chance to be honest. And because Nathan has started asking questions about his birth father. The adoption agency contacted me last month. James checked his watch. He needed to leave soon to pick up Sophie, but how could he walk away from this conversation? From the knowledge of a son he'd never known? I need time to process this, he said honestly. It's a lot. I understand, Eliza said. I don't expect anything from you, James. I just thought you deserved to know the truth, finally. She wrote her phone number and email address on a hotel notepad and slid it across the table to him. If you want to talk more, or if you have questions about Nathan. I'm here until Sunday. James took the paper, folded it carefully, and placed it in his wallet. I should go. My daughter. Of course, Eliza said quickly. Thank you again, for earlier. And for listening now. As he stood to leave, she added, she must be wonderful, your daughter. She is, James said. She's everything. Walking to his car, James felt like he was moving through a dream. The familiar streets seemed altered somehow, as if he'd stepped into a parallel universe where his life had taken a completely different path. A son. He had a son he'd never known, who was now almost a man himself. And Sophie, what would this mean for her? How would he explain to his daughter that she had a half-brother out there, a sibling born from a relationship that had ended before she was even born? By the time he reached Sophie's after-school program, James had managed to compose himself enough to greet her with his usual smile. But as they drove home, Sophie, perceptive as always, noticed something was off. "Dad? Are you okay? You're being weird." James glanced at his daughter, his miracle, his anchor after losing her mother. With her dark curls and serious eyes, she looked so much like Rebecca it sometimes took his breath away. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just had an unexpected meeting today that gave me a lot to think about." "Work stuff?" she asked, already losing interest as she pulled out her phone. "No," he said slowly. "Actually, I ran into someone I used to know a long time ago. Before I met your mom." Sophie looked up, suddenly curious. "Like an old girlfriend?" James couldn't help but smile at her tone, half disgusted, half intrigued. "Yes, actually. My first serious girlfriend from college." "Ew, gross," Sophie said, but she was smiling too. "Was it super awkward? Did she get all weird about you being, like, still hot for an old guy?" "Thanks for that," James laughed, grateful for her ability to lighten even the heaviest moments. "And yes, it was a little awkward. We haven't seen each other in 20 years. 20 years? That's literally longer than I've been alive. That's how time works, yes." They arrived home, and the conversation shifted to homework and dinner plans. But as James moved through their evening routine, helping Sophie with her math problems, making pasta, watching an episode of her favorite show, his mind kept returning to Eliza and the photo of the young man with his smile. After Sophie went to bed, James sat alone in the living room, Eliza's contact information in his hand. The sensible thing would be to wait, to give himself time to process this revelation before making any decisions. But something urged him forward, perhaps the same instinct that had made him intervene earlier that evening. He picked up his phone and typed a message, "I'd like to meet for lunch tomorrow, if you're free. There's more we need to discuss." Her reply came almost immediately, "I'd like that. Thank you." The next day, James arranged for Sophie to go to a friend's house after school, explaining he had an important meeting. He met Eliza at a quiet restaurant near her hotel, both of them more composed than they had been the previous evening. "I've been thinking about Nathan," James said after they ordered. "About what this means for him. For all of us." Eliza nodded, waiting for him to continue. "I'm angry that I missed his childhood," James admitted. "That I never got to teach him to ride a bike or help with his homework or see his first steps. Those are things I can never get back." "I know," Eliza said softly. "And I'm so sorry. But he's still my son," James continued. "And if he's asking questions about me, then maybe he wants to know me. I'd like the chance to know him too, if he's open to it." Relief washed over Eliza's face. "I was hoping you'd say that. The adoption agency said he's expressed interest in meeting both of us, when we're ready." They spent the next 2 hours talking, really talking, about the past 20 years. James told her about meeting Rebecca in graduate school, their happy marriage, the devastating cancer diagnosis that had come just after Sophie's 7th birthday. Eliza shared stories of her career as an environmental lawyer, her brief marriage that had ended amicably after 3 years, her close relationship with her mother after her father's death. "I never stopped thinking about you," she admitted. "Even after I married David, even though he was a good man. There was always this space in my life where you should have been." "I moved on," James said honestly.